Hello, students. I'm your English teacher. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to read out a story from your NCERT books for Class 7th English, HoneyComb, Chapter 1. The story is about a king who has 3 questions and he is seeking answers to them. Let's find out what are these 3 questions. Does the king get what he wants? The title of the story is 3 Questions. The thought came to a certain king that he would never fail if he knew 3 things. These 3 things were: what is the right time to begin something? Which people should he listen to? What is the most important thing for him to do? The king therefore sent messengers throughout his kingdom, promising a large sum of money to anyone who would answer these 3 questions. Many wise men came to the king, but they all answered his questions differently. In reply to the first question, some said, the king must prepare a timetable and then follow it strictly. Only in this way, they said, could he do everything at its proper time. Others said that it was impossible to decide in advance the right time for doing something. The king should notice all that was going on, avoid foolish pleasures, and always do whatever seemed necessary at that time. Yet others said that the king needed a council of wise men who would help him act at the proper time. This was because one man would find it impossible to decide correctly without help from others. The right time for every action. Council, a group of people chosen to give advice or to make rules. But then others said that there were some things which would be urgent. These things could not wait for the decisions of the council. In order to decide the right time for doing something, it is necessary to look into the future, and only magicians could do that. The king, therefore, would have to go to magicians. In their answers to the second questions, some said that the people most necessary to the king were his counselors. Others said the priest. A few others chose the doctors, and yet others said that his soldiers were the most necessary. Counselors, members of the council. To the third question, some said science. Others chose fighting, and yet others religious worship. As the answers to his questions were so different, the king was not satisfied and gave no reward. Instead, he decided to seek the advice of a certain hermit who was widely known for his wisdom. The hermit lived in a wood which he never left. He saw no one but simple people, and so the king put on ordinary clothes. Before he reached the hermit's hut, the king left his horse with his bodyguard and went on alone. Hermit, a person who lives alone and leads a simple life. Woods, a small forest. As the king came near the hermit's hut, he saw the hermit digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and continued digging. The hermit was old and weak, and as he woke, he breathed heavily. The king went up to the hermit and said, I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I need most? And what affairs are the most important? Affairs, things, matters, business. The hermit listened to the king, but did not speak. He went on digging. You are tired, said the king. Let me take the spade and walk in your place. Thanks, said the hermit, giving the king his spade. Then he sat down on the ground. When the king had dug 2 beds, he stopped and repeated his questions. The hermit gave no answers, but stood up, stretching out his hand for the spade, and said, Now you rest, and let me walk. But the king did not give him the spade and continued to dig. Beds, small patches of ground for plants. 1 hour passed, then another. The sun went down behind the trees, and at last the king stuck the spade into the ground and said, I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you can give me no answers, tell me so, and I will return home. Here comes someone running, said the hermit. Comprehension check. Students, here are some questions, exercises, which you have to do in your own. Why did the king want to know answers to 3 questions? Messengers were sent throughout the kingdom to fetch wise men, to find answers to the questions, to look for the wise hermit, to announce a reward for those who could answer the questions. Mark your choice. The king turned round and saw a bearded man running towards them. His hands were pressed against his stomach, from which blood was flowing. When he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. The king and the hermit fainted, lost consciousness. Removed the man's clothing and found a large wound in his stomach. The king washed and covered it with his handkerchief, but the blood would not stop flowing. The king redressed the wound until at last the bleeding stopped. The man felt better and asked for something to drink. The king brought fresh water and gave it to him. By this time the sun had set and the air was cool. The king, with the hermit's help, carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. The man closed his eyes and lay quiet. The king, tired by his walk and the work he had done, lay down on the floor and slept through the night. When he awoke, it was several minutes before he could remember. Redressed, dress again. Where he was, or who the strange bearded man lying on the bed was. Forgive me, said the bearded man in a weak voice, when he saw that the king was awake. I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for, said the king. You do not know me, but I know you. I am that enemy of yours who sought revenge on you. Because you put my brother to death and seized my property, I knew you had gone alone to see that hermit, and I made up my mind to kill you on your way home. But the day passed and you didn't return. So I left my hiding place and I came upon your bodyguard, who recognized me and wounded me. I escaped from him, but I should have died if you had not dressed my wounds. I wished to kill you, and you have saved my life. Now if I lived, I will serve you as your most faithful servant, and will order my sons to do the same. Forgive me. Seize, took by force, faithful, loyal and true. The king was very happy to have made peace with his enemy so easily, and to have won him over as a friend. He not only forgave him, but said he would send his servants and his own doctor to look after him, and he promised to give back the man his property. Leaving the wounded man, the king went out of the hut and looked round for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to get answers to his questions. The hermit was on his knees sowing seeds in the beds that had been dug the day before. The king went up to the hermit and said, "For the last time I beg you to answer my questions, wise man." "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still bending down to the ground and looking up at the king as he stood before him. "How have I been answered? What do you mean?" "Do you not see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday and had not dug these beds for me, you would have gone away. Then that man would have attacked you, and you would have wished you had stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds, and I was the most important man, and to do me good was your most important business. Afterward, when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were caring for him, because if you had not dressed his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. Remember then, there is only one time that is important, and that time is now. It is the most important time because it is the only time we have any power to act. The most necessary person is the person you are with at the particular moment, for no one knows what will happen in the future and whether we will meet anyone else. The most important business is to do that person good, because we were sent into this world for that purpose alone. Leo Tolstoy, retold. This is a story written by Leo Tolstoy. Here in this story, we can see that the king has some curiosity about three questions, and he finally got the answers from the wise hermit. For better understanding the story, let me sum it up. Once a king thought of finding out answers to three questions to avoid failure in life. The questions were: what is the right time to begin something? Which people should he listen to? What is the most important thing for him to do? So in order to get answers to these three questions, he sent messengers throughout his kingdom to announce a reward for those who could answer the questions. Many wise men came, but their answers were so varied that they did not satisfy the king. So the king decided to seek the advice of a wise hermit. The hermit lived in the forest. He met no one but the simple people. So the king put on ordinary clothes and went to see the hermit in disguise. When the king reached the hermit's hut, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and went on digging. The king requested him to answer his 3 questions. The hermit listened to the king, but did not speak. The hermit was old and weak. He was breathing heavily. The king took the spade from him and started digging. After some time, the king repeated his questions, but the hermit pointed towards a bearded man who came running towards them. His hands were pressed against his bleeding stomach. As he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. The king dressed his wound. The king and the hermit carried him into the hut and laid him on the bed. Next morning, the bearded man asked for the king's forgiveness. He told the king that he was his enemy. He wanted to kill him because the king had put his brother to death and seized his property. The king forgave the man. Before leaving, the king wished once more to get answers to his questions. The hermit was sowing seeds in the bed. The king repeated his questions. The hermit finally replied that the most important time is now. The most important person is he with whom you are at a particular time. The most important business is to do that person good. The king left the hermit's hut fully satisfied. Students, here are some more exercises for you. Comprehension check. Complete the following sentences by adding the appropriate parts of the sentences given in the box. 1. Many wise men answered the king's questions. Blank. 2. Someone suggested that there should be a council of wise men. Blank. Someone else suggested that the king should have a timetable. 4. The king requested the hermit. Blank. 5. The king washed and dressed the bearded man's wound. Blank. You have to choose your answers from the box. Here are some more questions. Walking with the text, answer the following questions. Why was the king advised to go to magicians? 2. In answer to the second questions, whose advice did the people say would be important to the king? What suggestions were made in answers to the third questions? Did the wise man win the reward? If not, why not? 5. How did the king and the hermit help the wounded man? 6. Who was the bearded man? Why did he ask for the king's forgiveness? The king forgave the bearded man. What did he do to show his forgiveness? 8. What were the hermit's answers to the 3 questions? Write each answer separately. Which answer do you like most and why? Working with a language. Match items in list A with their meanings in list B. Fainted, lost consciousness. Here is an example. Column A. Wounded, awoke, forgive, faithful, pity, bad, return. Column B. Got up from sleep, give back, small patches of ground for plants, severely injured, pardon, loyal, feel sorry for. Use any three of the above words in sentences of your own. You may change the form of the word. Each of the following sentences has two blanks. Fill in the blanks with appropriate forms of the word given in the bracket. He has dash to help me. Do you think he will remember his dash bracket promise? He has promised to help me. Do you think he will remember his promise? Remember won't. The dash said that only fresh evidence would make him change his dash bracket judge. I didn't notice any serious dash of opinion among the debaters, although they dash from one another over small points. Bracket differ. It's a fairly simple question to dash, but will you accept my dash as final bracket answer? It isn't dash that dash should always be the mother of invention. Bracket necessary. Hermits are dash man. How they acquire their dash, no one can tell. Wise. The committee has dash to make Jagdish captain of the team. The dash is likely to please everyone. Bracket decide. Asking for dash is as noble as willingness to dash forgive. Speaking and writing. This also you can try at home.